When I became an actor, I never fantasized about playing James Bond. As a kid, yeah. But that was being James Bond. That was something else. That was that was fantasy.
Welcome back to Crawford-Clark Close-Up and the last leg of our James Bond retrospective. In this video we're examining the three vastly different adaptations of Ian Fleming's debut Bond novel Casino Royale, the one that started it all. The first version of Casino Royale takes us back to October the 21st, 1954, with a live American teleplay through Climax Mystery Theatre. Barry Nelson leads the cast as card-sense Jimmy Bond, who meets Clarence Leiter at the Casino Royale and shows him the basics of Baccarat before playing against the peculiarly pronounced Le Chiffre for large stakes at the gambling tables. Peter Lorre is great casting as the limey villain, and Linda Christian portrays Valerie Mathis, a character entirely created for this teleplay, who we're to understand is a former lover of Bond. For a live performance, everyone is largely on point over the 50-minute runtime, but it's hard to take seriously a story of great style and nuance such as Fleming's work when it's reduced to this. Nelson tries his best as Bond, and they've tried to make Bond charming with different one-liners and humour, but Nelson doesn't quite strike the right balance, seeming very rough in his presentation. Fleming was obviously disappointed in the result of him selling off the rights to his first Bond novel and quickly gave up on the idea of the book being adapted into a credible motion picture. In July 1958, a different medium sought the rights to Casino Royale, and between July and December that year, the UK newspaper Daily Express serialised Fleming's first Bond novel as a comic strip. The rest is history, of course, as Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman teamed with the United Artists in 1961 and began work on the first official Bond movie, Dr. No, shortly thereafter. The adaptations of Casino Royale didn't stop there, though, as actor-director Gregory Ratoff purchased the original film rights to Casino Royale shortly after the teleplay in 1955 for $6,000. He partnered with producer Charles K. Feldman and would spend the following 5 years trying to launch Casino Royale. From the trumpet-based main theme and cartoon-style main titles, you get the impression this is a parody from the get-go, despite an insanely impressive lineup of who's who in the cast. The plot revolves around David Niven's Sir James Bond coming out of retirement to investigate the sudden death of his superior, M. From here, Bond attends M's ancestral home in Scotland and is seduced by M's wife and promiscuous daughters before surviving an attack from a remote-controlled explosion. Now taking over as M, Sir James recruits several people to become James Bond 007. Expert Baccarat player Evelyn Tremble, played by Peter Sellers, becoming one Bond, and he works with Bond alumni Ursula Andress' Vesper Lind to play Le Chiffre at Casino Royale. The production was chaotic from start to finish, with a variety of directors filming their own segments of the film, including John Huston, Ken Hughes and Val Guest. Shooting on the film began at Shepperton Studios on January the 11th, 1966, and would release in spring 1967, just a few months before the fifth official Eon Bond movie You Only Live Twice, making $41 million. As for thoughts on the production itself, despite some humorous moments, these largely focused around Sellers' expert comic timing, the film is shambolic, bearing absolutely no resemblance to the source novel, and drags interminably through its 130-minute runtime. There were disagreements on the set. Sellers would receive top billing with a $750,000 salary, despite making ridiculous demands around filming. Record Ursula Andress: Peter Sellers wanted to change the whole script every day, and every day he got in a big fight with Charlie Feldman. Then Peter walked off and we had to wait. It was the craziest film I ever made. On the contrary, director John Huston only had positive recollections. I never had so much fun in my life as making this film. It has been the first occasion I've been able to put together a high burlesque for the screen, and it was a lark from beginning to end. The general consensus remained that a definitive version of Fleming's first Bond novel had yet to be filmed, but the rights to film Casino Royale were tied up in legal disputes until the year 2000, when the rights reverted back to Eon Productions. Having made 4 of the most successful Bonds by the turn of the 21st century, Pierce Brosnan was asked at the lavish premiere for Die Another Day whether he'd be returning for a 5th outing in the tux. He advised reporters that the producers were comfortable with him continuing in the coveted role for as long as he wanted. Despite remarking that the films are leviathans now, monsters, due to the big competition out there, Brosnan suggested he'd like to do another 2, to finish on 6, as Connery had originally done. Die Another Day director Lee Tamahori had been to a screening with Broccoli and Wilson in summer 2002 of The Bourne Identity, ahead of the release of the 20th Bond adventure, and he'd advised producers that the game was changing fast and that they'd need to seriously rethink the direction they were going to take for future Bonds. Tamahori felt that there would be a radical reinvention of what the Bond character is and what MI6 is as soon as Brosnan hangs up the Walther PPK. Quoted in SFX magazine to promote Die Another Day in late 2002, Tamahori remarked, "If he's going to be an agent with a 00 license to kill people, what does that actually mean? How can you adapt that to the modern world? All they've ever done is update it. Now they've got to really reinvigorate it." Surely this was Tamahori admitting defeat, admitting that Die Another Day was a nail in the coffin for the kind of larger-than-life, fantastical Bonds of yesteryear, that Bond needed to return to the spirit of Fleming's novels once again. Tamahori also felt that following director Martin Campbell's work on Brosnan's debut GoldenEye was always going to be a challenge for anyone else who stepped in to forward the franchise. He felt that he, Michael Apted and Roger Spottiswoode had all simply tried to emulate what Campbell had achieved on GoldenEye, but none of the successes had made as big a leap. When the next person comes along, someone will have the opportunity to push it to the next level. For all intents and purposes, Brosnan was still Bond, and work on his 5th outing in the role was entering pre-production stages. Before this, however, a spin-off movie of Halle Berry's character Jinx from Die Another Day was announced before the end of 2002 to be written by Bond scribes Neil Purvis and Robert Wade. They described the project as having more of a Bourne sensibility about it, that it would be tougher than the average Bond film. Eon were ultimately unprepared to spend the kind of money needed to flesh out this character, and by October 2003, the project was shelved. Lost with which direction to take the Bond series in next, the producers handed Purvis and Wade the original Casino Royale to attempt to adapt for the screen. Brosnan recalled filming After the Sunset in 2004 and receiving the call from Wilson and Broccoli thanking him for being a great Bond, but stating that they didn't know how to continue with him in the role. Brosnan was understandably gutted, but thanked the producers for their honesty, and now the search was on for a new 007. Ideas for Bond's early career were first drafted by Michael Wilson around the time that Timothy Dalton was cast as Bond. They were looking back in the mid-1980s at an origin story for Bond where he was in his 20s. As Michael Wilson now concedes, you had to introduce Bond as a veteran. Even though it's his first assignment as a 00, he still has to appear as a veteran. During the 90s, the producers felt that Brosnan, with his experience, would be better continuing in the vein of the Bonds that had come before. As the screenplay was being developed, producers were looking for a director. Layer Cake director Matthew Vaughn was one of the first names in the hat, but Broccoli and Wilson thought he lacked the experience needed. Enduring Love director Roger Mitchell was sent a copy of Casino Royale to read and was offered the chance to direct the film, but he turned it down. GoldenEye director Martin Campbell would eventually be hired in February 2005 to direct the film, and Eon Productions announced at the same time that Bond 21 will indeed be Casino Royale. Campbell was enticed to return to Bond as he was excited by the prospect of going back to the beginning with the character, showing how flawed a character Bond really is. Neil Purvis remarked for writers Matthew Field and A.J. Chowdhury in their indispensable Bond Bible, Some Kind of Hero, "If we had to come to Barbara and Michael and said, we want Bond to play poker for half an hour, have his balls whacked, not escape from the villain, and then have his double agent girlfriend commit suicide, they would probably have told us to get lost. But because it was Fleming, we had the mandate." The template was already in place, allowing for room to play with Fleming's material. Million Dollar Baby and Crash screenwriter Paul Haggis was also drafted in by producers to flesh out parts of the screenplay, including the third act with the sinking house in Venice and Vesper's death. With spiralling costs of working in the UK, Prague's Barrandov Studios are announced as the home of production for Casino Royale. The biggest rumour, as with any change in direction for the Bond series, is who is going to take up the mantle of Bond. A number of actors were tested. On September 26th and 27th, 2005, Henry Cavill stepped into the tux as Bond. On September 28th, Sam Worthington was in front of the cameras, and on the 29th of September, it was the turn of Daniel Craig. Henry Cavill was considered a very strong contender, but aged 22, he was considered too young for Bond at the time. Barbara Broccoli was convinced that Craig was the next Bond after watching him in Layer Cake, despite Martin Campbell feeling that Craig hadn't given his best at his screen test. Craig was initially reluctant about taking on the role without reading a script. Paul Haggis completed work on the script in September 2005, and Craig responded enthusiastically to the story. Craig would be introduced to the press as Bond number 6 on the 14th of October 2005 at a live press conference launch event. Shooting began at Barrandov Studios in January 2006, where the producers handed Craig a first edition of Fleming's first Bond novel. The first work completed on the film was the Embassy shootout, giving Craig the opportunity to launch into the action, with Campbell enthusiastically barking orders and yelling action. There was a conscious effort to strip back the well-known tropes of the Bond series for this reimagining of the character, so the film opens in black and white, with Bond earning his 00 status, with a flashback to Bond killing a contact, Fisher, in a bathroom, and then Bond nonchalantly shooting bent MI6 Section Chief Dryden in his office in one of the shortest Bond pre-titles in memory. It's a succinct introduction to the brutality of the character. This is Bond starting out, earning his licence. The fight in the bathroom is brutal, and you can see it in Bond's eyes as well as in the struggles from his opponents. In a stroke of genius, on February the 9th, 2006, a twist on the standard gun barrel opening is placed at the end of the pre-title sequence. As Bond turns away, Fisher goes to fire at Bond as his back is turned, but Bond betters him. Picking up his fallen gun from the bathroom floor, he turns and fires before the blood fills the iris and Daniel Kleinman's titles fill the screen. Gone are the scantily clad ladies and the eroticism of the Bond titles, for Casino Royale to be replaced by an inspired card motif throughout the sequence, with silhouettes of Bond fighting opponents who all fall and disperse like cards. It's one of the most creative title designs in the series up to this point, coupled with the anthemic You Know My Name from the late Chris Cornell. Returning Bond composer David Arnold collaborated with Cornell on the track, and the announcement of the new Bond theme song came on July 26, 2006. Said Arnold, "You try and find someone that sounds like Bond. Chris obviously has a voice that could kick a wall down, something that Daniel could physically do, so it felt like that was an interesting match. The title, You Know My Name, suggests that he's confident enough to say that I don't even need to tell you who I am or what I'm about, because by the time you get through this experience, you're going to know." For Cornell, they didn't want to echo any recent Bond theme songs. Their attitude was that they wanted somebody who vocally would be unapologetically masculine. Obviously 1987 was the last time a male artist sang a Bond song, but I didn't read too much into that. I assume that meant that they just wanted me to do what I do. The song stands up as one of the most energetic of the Bond themes, making for a great start to this new darker take on the character. Craig is dynamite in his first time out as 007, though admits that, when I first became an actor, I never fantasised about playing James Bond. As a kid, yeah, but that was being James Bond. That was a fantasy. Craig acquits himself well from the outset, clearly doing as much of the action that he's able to do before the stuntmen intervene for the really dangerous stuff. For Craig, it was vital to understand who Bond is at this point in his life and his career. Casino Royale being the first of the books, he's got rough edges, that's for sure. And as the film progresses, we see him become the man that we know, love and hate. Because we're starting at the beginning, we're given a bit more sway with it, and we can try to understand the man who is James Bond. He falls in love, and other things happen along the way. We find someone who gets kind of hurt. Much has been made of the comparison between Craig's grittier, more humanist portrayal of the secret agent and its similarities to Dalton's approach to the role when taking over from the campier movies of the Roger Moore era. Said Barbara Broccoli, "Obviously, when Tim came on as Bond, he wanted to go back to the books and go back to Fleming and take the more serious, grittier approach. We feel he did a really great job with that. I think that's something Cubby always used to say to us. Whenever you're stuck, go right back to Fleming. It's all there. He's always the solution." So when we finally got the rights to Casino Royale, it was a huge achievement for us to be able to make that film, because it was the film that Cubby and Harry had originally wanted to make, and it had been made twice, but not properly. In the same way that Dalton confessed to wanting to get out there and be seen to be doing as much of the action as possible, so too Craig wanted the audience to be able to see that it's me and it's real. After all, if you don't get bruised playing Bond, you're not doing it properly. Two great examples of this are in the brilliant parkour chase at the top of the film, where Craig's Bond worked closely alongside free-running founder Sebastian Foucan to create a pulse-pounding action sequence. Another is in the brutal stairwell fight against Urbano, where Bond strangles his opponent, then proceeds to examine his bloodied body in the mirror in his hotel room before returning to the poker game. Craig also proves adept at the sombre moments in the story. His chemistry with Ava Green's enigmatic Vesper Lind is a highlight, from the moment they meet and their deconstruction of one another on the train into Montenegro, through the tragic denouement where Bond punishes himself for not being able to save her. Having established herself as M during the Brosnan era, Judi Dench was unsure whether she'd be asked back for Casino Royale, given Colin Salmon, John Cleese and Samantha Bond had not been invited to return. From a continuity point of view, it makes no sense whatsoever having Dench play M when Bond is starting out as a 00, but the thought of recasting M didn't even cross the producers' minds, and Dench signed on for a fifth film on November 24th, 2005. Joining M at MI6 for this film is Tobias Menzies' character Villiers, so named after the actor James Villiers, who portrayed Tanner in For Your Eyes Only. Bond's brother from Langley, Felix Leiter, had last been seen in Licence to Kill, played by the brilliant David Hedison. For Casino Royale, Leiter introduces himself to Bond at the casino, as he's also playing at the head table against Le Chiffre. Jeffrey Wright is a younger, intuitive Felix, and his chemistry with Craig is excellent. As this is an origin story, MI6 is without Moneypenny or Q. The gentleman who installs the tracker in Bond's wrist in the Bahamas is the closest we get to a quartermaster this time around. We'd have to wait until Craig is better established in the role for more familiar Bond characters to enter the mould. No Bond is complete without a memorable adversary, and Danish-born Mads Mikkelsen is suitably sadistic as Le Chiffre. Gone are the scarred faces, the eye patches and the hollowed-out volcanoes, but in spite of the character's insistence that there's nothing sinister, Le Chiffre is an asthmatic who suffers from a tear duct that weeps blood, a characteristic that Bond highlights during an anxious moment around the poker table. The other enigmatic figure who's behind a shadowy organisation is Mr. White, played by Jesper Christensen, who, whilst only used sparingly during the film, does allow Bond to deliver the immortal introduction as the film concludes. Caterina Marino's beautiful Solange is Bond's first conquest in the film, the mistress of an assassin, and her name is lifted from Fleming's short story 007 in New York. She's certainly the sacrificial lamb, surviving all of about 10 minutes on screen, but she's memorable in the role. The key woman in Bond's first mission is of course Vesper Lind, so named by Fleming himself as a play on West Berlin, indicating Vesper's divided loyalties as a double agent under Soviet control. Olivia Wilde and Ava Green were the two contenders for the role, despite pressure from studio heads to cast an A-lister like Angelina Jolie or Charlize Theron in this pivotal role. French actress Green had her reservations about taking on the role of the Bond girl, thinking she'd be reduced to walking around in a bikini, until she read the script and appreciated the nuances and the conflict at the heart of the character. Green and Craig sparkle together in every moment they share on screen, and you can totally buy that Bond would fall for Vesper. Aside from Tracy in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Vesper represents the most integral person in Bond's emotional maturity. Says Green, "The love story is very fundamental to Bond's formulation. His heart is broken, his truth is lost. Later he's going to become the best secret agent ever, because he's so detached and can just be like a robot and not be emotional. Vesper plays an enormous part in shaping who James Bond will become." Another actress who returns for a cameo as one of the poker players at the casino is Sai Chin, playing Madame Wu. Eagle-eyed fans will remember her as the agent Ling, who Connery's Bond is bedding in the pre-titles of You Only Live Twice. Peter Lamont, who had worked as production designer on the series since the early 1980s after Ken Adams' departure from the series, made sure that he'd go out on a high with Royale, creating over 40 different sets for this film alone. Costume designer Lindy Hemming was afforded the task of redesigning Bond for the 2000s as a much more physical Bond, whose tailoring and wardrobe had to reflect this. Craig would also be dressed in more street-type fashionable clothing. There's a great deal to love about Royale. The pacing is fantastic from start to end. The action scenes are well structured. There's a significant reduction in CGI after its overblown use in Die Another Day, and even the quieter, more reflective character moments bristle with energy. One of the highlights of the film, though you'd never believe it to read on paper, is the poker game. Director Martin Campbell rolled cameras on the game on April the 6th, 2006, and recalled that the card game was probably the most difficult scene I've ever had to film. It's one thing to shoot a game of chemin de fer or 21, that's very simple. When you're playing Texas Hold'em poker with 10 players around a table, that's tough, because it's a more complex game and it's very tricky to film and maintain the continuity throughout. The scenes around the table are edited so carefully and the gameplay is fascinating to watch. Vesper's entrance at the very beginning of the game into the casino itself is up there as an ultimate Bond girl moment, as is the beautiful crossfade between Vesper's smile and the middle of the poker table in one of the series' most beautiful transition shots. It looks very old school and is very well done. Perhaps the icing on the cake, however, when Bond returns to the game table after being poisoned, he looks directly at a bemused Le Chiffre and proclaims, "That last hand nearly killed me." This is classic Bond. The only troublesome sequence for this reviewer is the poisoning and Bond going into cardiac arrest. Having watched the scene a number of times with my wife, who is a paramedic, shaking her head saying that the scene wouldn't play out that way in reality, it sadly takes me out of the moment somewhat. In the last months of principal photography, Bond's torture and recuperation are shot before the crew depart for Venice at the end of May 2006, a location the series hadn't visited since Moonraker nearly 30 years earlier. The film also lands in the Guinness Book of World Records for the 7 rolls completed by the Aston Martin DBS. The suspenseful moment was shot at Dunsfold Airfield in Surrey. Filming would also take place at Dunsfold for the Miami airport chase in June and July 2006. Production on Casino Royale wrapped in July 2006 after 7 months of globetrotting, and the film received its world premiere on Tuesday the 17th of November 2006. The doubters of Craig as the first blonde Bond were quickly hushed when the film made all-time high US and UK grosses of $167 and $105 million respectively, setting a record for the series at the time. The final gross for Casino Royale came in at $594 million. David Arnold's score, arguably one of his very best for Bond, was released on the 13th of November 2006, and the theme for Vesper and Bond's romance in particular is a series highlight. The patience from Arnold to wait until the end credits to unleash a new rendition of the world-famous James Bond theme still leaves every fan pounding their fists into the air in delight. The reaction at the Royal Albert Hall for Casino Royale in concert back in September 2017, when Arnold took to the stage and played the guitar along with the orchestra, was an incredible moment. Casino Royale would earn BAFTA nominations for Adapted Screenplay for Purvis Wade and Paul Haggis, Actor in a Leading Role for Daniel Craig, the Anthony Asquith Award for Achievement in Film Music for David Arnold, cinematography for Phil Mayhew, editing for Stuart Baird, production design for Peter Lamont, sound, visual effects, and the Orange Rising Star Award for Ava Green. The film would end up winning the award for sound and for Rising Star for Green in February 2007. Having grown up on the Pierce Brosnan Bond movies, Craig's debut was certainly a radical departure, and I'm not entirely sure I was sold on the new Bond when I first saw Casino Royale, but throughout Craig's tenure in the role, the film remains the benchmark to which all the successors are aiming to reach. This is a confident, remarkable debut, and for Cubby and Harry, who always wanted to film Casino Royale but were never granted the opportunity, they must have been looking down and beaming. From Crawford-Clark Close-Up. Where does Casino Royale sit for you? If you're a millennial, it's likely to be your number one, and it's hard to argue with that. Perhaps the older Bond fan might disagree. Whatever your thoughts, let us know in the comments below, and let us know what you think of our review. Come and find Crawford-Clark Close-Up on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can find us on the movie app Letterboxd, just search CC Close-Up, and you can drop us an email with suggestions for future reviews on the channel to crawfordclarkcloseup@gmail.com. Most importantly, don't forget to subscribe to the channel at the top of the page to ensure you don't miss out on any new content. We're so close now to the release of Daniel Craig's fifth and final Bond, No Time to Die. Before we get there, however, up next we give our thoughts on the series' first direct sequel, 2008's Quantum of Solace. Thanks for watching, and until next time, that's a wrap.